So for my contemporary realistic fiction book, I chose Fancy Nancy and the Boy from Paris. So I am going to read some of it. So I always get to school early, but on Monday I am tardy, which is a fancy word for late. I come in and see a new kid. He is standing next to Miss Glass. Robert comes from Paris, Miss Glass says to everyone. He just moved here. Paris? Paris is a city in France. It is gorgeous. That's a fancy word for beautiful. Bonjour, I say in the book nook. In French, that means hello. I'm Nancy. I never met anybody from Paris before. I speak slowly so he will understand me. It's really nice here, Robert says. I miss it. He has a book on cowboys. He probably wants to learn all about this country. I want to go there someday. I show him my book. It's about a dog in Paris. Do you like the U.S.? Yes, says Robert, don't you? Yes, I do, I say. I've lived here all my life. Then Miss Glass puts a finger to her mouth. This is not talking time, she says. This is reading time. On Tuesday, I sat next to Robert at lunch. Have you ever been to the Eiffel Tower, I ask? Robert nods and swallows. Lots of times. Our house was near it. I tell Robert, I know about the Eiffel Tower. There's a poster of it in my room. I know lots about Paris. I share some of my lunch. These are donut holes, I say. Robert gives me a funny look. I know that. I've eaten donut holes before, Nancy. That night, I tell my mom and dad about Robert. He already speaks English, and I tried to be his friend. Everything sounds so fancy in French. Why don't you just ask him over to play, says my dad. So the next day I do, and we play soccer. Do you play soccer in Paris? I ask. Sure, all the time, said Robert. I'm a really good kicker. On Thursday it is show and share, and Robert brings a toy horse. My grandpa has a horse like this. And then Robert passed around a photo. I miss her a lot. Her name's Belle. In French, that means beautiful. Belle, I say to myself. Now I know another word in French. On Friday, Mom's at work. Miss Devine picks us up from school. She lives next door. I tell Robert this. Robert is from Paris, I tell Miss Devine. At home, we make a tent in the yard, and we pretend we are bears outside, and we pretend to be terrified of each other. Then we play soccer. We let my little sister play too. Robert's a great kicker. My dog runs around the yard. That's Frenchy, I tell Robert, but she's not really French. You'll like her anyway. We go inside and I show Robert my room. See, there's the Eiffel Tower, I say. Yes, said Robert, but that one does not have a cowboy hat on it. The Eiffel Tower is in Paris, France. It is taller and it is more famous, but we have an Eiffel Tower too. Ours has a cowboy hat on top. Wait a minute, I'm very perplexed. But you're from Paris, France, I say, aren't you? No, I'm from Texas. Paris, Texas, Robert says. Miss Glass told everybody that the first day. Robert showed me Paris, Texas on the globe. Oh, I guess I missed that part. And I feel a little silly, but not for long. After all, I have a new ami, even if he isn't French. That's French for friend. That's the end of this book. So, we're going to talk about contemporary realistic fiction and different aspects of it. So, contemporary realistic fiction, it tells a story of something that did not happen but could happen in real life. So in Fancy Nancy, it is considered contemporary realistic fiction because this could be any little girl growing up right now. She talks and speaks in our language, or it doesn't necessarily have to be our language to be contemporary realistic fiction. She goes to school, she makes friends. All of these things make her just like anyone else. So, this can be considered something that happens in real life. The book itself is around a first grade reading level, so just keep that in mind. So, When it comes to suspended disbelief, many times we see this in contemporary realistic fiction. And it's basically where readers willingly ignore different elements in literature to help enjoy the story themselves. So when it comes to characterization, we know that Nancy and her new friends and her teachers and her parents and her neighbors, they're not all real people, but they could be real people and they do real things like real people do. So some things that can be considered odd are that Nancy just has a new boy come to her class and he's from Paris, France, right? That can be odd. But in the end, we find out that he's actually from Paris, Texas. So we really have the character development and showing that, like, we willingly just ignore that these people aren't real, but they could be because they come from places that we know. So different settings in this story. There's nothing super absurd or anything. She's at a school, the playground, home. They talk about real places in the world, like Paris, France, which Nancy thinks her new friend is from, or Paris, Texas, where he's actually from. So, I mean, they go to school like everyone else. They're at home and playing. They go to the playground and they play soccer. These are all things that we can consider to be contemporary realistic fiction and that we just ignore that they're not actually happening, but it could. I'd say the theme of this story is making friendships, which is a real thing. In school, we definitely find our friends and who we are connected to through that. So there's no really suspended disbelief there either. I find that this book really shows true life and what can happen when you make friends. And finally, the point of view is through Nancy's thoughts. The whole time she's telling the story, she's thinking, Robert's my new friend, this is what's happening. And she's showing us exactly what's going on in her life. So really, there's no suspended disbelief in this either. Overall, I would say that there are some things we could think about. So, like, why do some stories have suspended